On today's show, the three spots on the football team the Badger fans are more worried about than they should be. These spots are actually strengths. On today's show, let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, Badger fans? Thank you for making Locked On Badgers one of your first listens every day. I am your host, Ryan Herrings. Really appreciate you tuning in, listening as always, as we continue to build this community. Let's go. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn. I'd like to thank LinkedIn for being the official college football recruiting sponsor across the Locked On Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. So, fun show today. I've been kind of going through preseason positional rankings, Badger football rankings, fan previews, and I've seen a theme with a couple positions that I don't really necessarily agree with, and I wanted to just talk about it. What are the three spots on the Badgers team, the football team, the three positions that I think people are a little too critical of, and I think are better than the consensus is? So that's what we're going to do in today's show. As always, if you agree, disagree, leave a comment. Let me know what you think of the spots that you believe are undervalued. Let me know if you agree with me on mine, if you think I'm off base or not. As always, I'm here for the Discord. That's what this is all about, and let's get into it. No, without further ado, I think the biggest one people are missing on is the D-line. Straight up. I think the D-line is going to be one of the strengths of the team this year. I don't think it's a weak spot at all, and I'm seeing people really worried about the depth. I'm seeing people worried about the upside. I've seen people worry about maybe some of the young players. I'm going to tell you, this is a defensive line that is big, it's salty, it's strong, it's veteran-laden, it has an NFL guy. When I've seen past Wisconsin defenses excel with, in my opinion, the defense line no better than this, and in some cases worse than this, I'm just not worried. I think this defensive line is going to be really good. So let's start with the man in the middle. Let's start with the trigger man on this defense line, Keanu Benton. You're talking about an NFL guy. Like, this defensive line is anchored in the middle by a 315, 320-pound monster. Just a sawed-off tree trunk that you can't push around, that's shown, even against the Ohio States, the ability to create pressure, to create some havoc, who's gotten in better shape progressively throughout the course of his career. He's more of a three-down player. This is a player in Benton that's going to be drafted into the NFL. He's an NFL dude. And Wisconsin's super lucky he came back. Now, he probably came back because he's not a top, 3-round pick, because he doesn't flash that consistent pass rushing upside that those players have to. But he's still an NFL guy. And you're getting a player in the inside who's been a starter for 3 years and has anchored this defense. He's been durable. He's disruptive. He has great hands, physically a brute. Just a great player. And if you're going to start to build a 3-4 defensive line around a player, you're not going to find a lot better in college football. Yeah, I said it, than Keanu Benton to build a 3-4 line around. Now, you're going to find higher upside overall defensive linemen, obviously. But to build this Wisconsin 3-4 defense line around, you're going to start with Benton, and you really can't be that worried about the defensive line if you have a building block like that. And then you look at Isiah Mullens, who's a senior. Also, I use this term for Benton, but Mullens is another guy. He's a sawed-off tree trunk. Like, he is physically imposing, 6'4", 6'3", 300 pounds, great center of gravity, plays low. He's not a great pass rusher, but he's going to be a great two-down, strong-side defensive end who's going to help get Wisconsin. Again, keep in mind, when Wisconsin's defense puts the other offense into 3rd and long, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 15, they're going into their pass rush situations. Mullens is coming off the field at that point. It's going to be Keanu Benton, some other defense linemen, and like 5 linebackers, right? So you have to understand the role that Wisconsin's defensive line plays here. Mullens isn't here to get after the quarterback. He's here to force 2nd and 11, right? He's here to force 3rd and 7. And he's going to be really good at that. He's a senior. He's physically developed, played a lot of football. That's your other starter. And then you got James Thompson, who's probably going to be your other starter on the defensive line. And Thompson is a guy who the staff has loved for a long time, athletic. He's probably your upside pass rusher off the edge who can also be big enough to stop the run. I just think that top 3 right there I think it's phenomenal. And maybe not phenomenal. Phenomenal is too high. Like, if you had a really good defensive end with more of that 3-down upside to pair with Benton, that's probably phenomenal. But it's really good. Benton, Mullens, and Thompson is really good. And then that 2D behind them, Rhodus Johnson, Isaac Townsend, and Gio Paez, you're now looking at a 2D with 6 players that are almost all seniors and juniors, right? I mean, it is aside from Thompson, it's all upperclassmen that have been in college football or been in the program for a long time, who are physically developed, who are big dudes, and are just going to be really tough to move around. And again, that's what the defensive line in this Wisconsin 3-4 needs to do. They need to eat up the blocks. They need to keep people off the linebackers. They need to force long down and distances. And when they do that, the Wisconsin defense wins because there's too many linebackers that are really good in this defense for the opposing quarterbacks to have any time to throw the ball. And I'm going to get into it later, but the secondary is also going to be a strength. So I think people are just expecting this defensive line. They're hoping it needs to do something it doesn't need to do. In the 3-4, they just need to occupy blockers. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, no defensive coach is ever going to be like, tell your 3-4 defensive lineman, don't go make plays against the quarterback. But as long as the defensive line isn't getting blown off the ball, as long as they're making it really hard to run, as long as they're eating up double teams, this defense is going to be great. And that's the barometer by which you need to judge this defensive line. Are they going to do those things? Yeah, this defensive line is going to do those things. This defensive line is going to be, you're not going to move them off the point. You're not going to move them off the line of scrimmage. And as long as that happens, it's going to open up everything for these tremendous linebackers to get after it, for Jim Leonard to dial up some blitz. I just think it's a group that's going to do everything that they're supposed to do and give you a little bit more, right? Because I look at guys like Isaac Townsend, who came in from Oregon 2 years ago, 6'5", strong side defensive end. I think he's going to give you something. I really like that pickup. And he didn't play a lot last year. I think he's going to play quite a bit this year. I think Gio Paez, the junior, the guy who's 320 pounds, a pretty good recruiting win, has had to bide his time. Coming in off the 2 deep, I think he's a little quicker and give you a little bit of penetration. James Thompson, I think, is going to give you some pass rush. I've already talked about Mullens and Benton. It's just really, in my opinion, a really solid 2 deep. I think it's getting slept on. There's a star player in Benton. There's an upside player in Thompson. And there's just a couple lunch pail guys with Townsend, Paez, and Mullens that, quite frankly, this defense needs, and this defense has always had when it's been successful. So I love the group. I would give it at least a B, and I'm seeing people really concerned. I'm seeing people thinking it's a weak spot of the defense. I'm telling you, this defense doesn't have a weak spot. It doesn't. It's certainly not the defensive line. I don't think it's inside linebackers. I don't think it's safeties either. I don't think the defense has a weak spot. And I certainly, again, wouldn't think it's a defensive line headlined by Keanu Benton and a 2 deep that is incredibly veteran-laden. That's the other part, too. We need to talk about this. Wisconsin, the developmental program that it is, and we all know that. You're telling me that, and I'm saying you're in the term of, I'm getting this sense that people are concerned about this defensive line, that a defensive line with a 2 deep composed almost entirely of seniors and juniors at Wisconsin is going to be a weak spot. It's not going to happen. Barring injury, which you always have to say, listen, every position is strong barring injury, okay? The running backs are really strong barring injury to Braylon Allen and Ches Malusi, okay? So let's be real. Barring injury to Keanu Benton and Isiah Mullens, but barring injury, this defensive line is really good, and I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to see senior Benton. I'm excited to see James Thompson roll into this role. Rhodus Johnson's another guy we haven't talked about. He was a practice darling a couple seasons ago. The coaching staff raved about him. Athletic, big kid, great recruiting win from a cycle a couple years ago. Had Penn State offers, I believe. So, yeah, be excited about the defensive line, Badger fans. I don't think it's going to let you down this year, and I think it's going to anchor what should be another top 10, top 15 defense in Madison. So that's my first one. Coming up next, we're going to talk about a position that, in my opinion, is much maligned at Wisconsin, but the Badgers coaching staff did some really unusual things this offseason to address it, and I think it's going to be a strength. So stick around for that. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn. As the sun comes out, small businesses have continued to grow. LinkedIn makes it easier to grow your team. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the people you want to interview faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn. Reach your network and beyond on the world's largest professional network, over 810 million people. Add your job, and LinkedIn's profile will help spread the word of what you're looking for to the largest professional network on the planet. And it has great tools to allow you to filter out applicants that really don't meet what you're looking for. They don't meet the wickets, and it's win-win, right? It saves time on both the applicants and your side. You're going to get the people into your building, into your job position that are the right fits for what you're looking for. And they're there for the right reasons as well. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn. 40 million people. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you, everyone, again, for making Locked On Badgers your first listen every day. And Locked On is also doing NFL Stars Move the Betting Lines most. So basically, who are the 50 most valuable NFL players according to the odds makers at BetOnline? That's coming up on Locked On, available July 18th. And we're going to jump into the next one. Like I said, we're not going to dilly-dally here. What is the next most, in my opinion, undervalued position at Wisconsin? Who are people worried about the most that really they shouldn't be? And I've already talked about the defensive line, where I think that people should be really excited about. Let's talk about corners. Let's talk about the cornerback position, and a spot at Wisconsin that is often, very, very, people are very critical of the cornerback play at Wisconsin. It's looked at as one of the weak spots of the defense. It's going to be really, so let me start with this. The cornerbacks this year are going to be so interesting to watch, right? Because they brought in 3 transfers, and they have a whole cadre of young players that I think have some upside and are exciting. So all the transfers coming in, seniors, a lot of experience, and you have Alexander Smith, who's a senior. I think this position went from being the potential weak spot, the potential hole in the armor of this defense, to really maybe one of the strongest cornerback units a Wisconsin defense has had since the Derrick Tindal, Nick Nelson years, and maybe better than that. And that's high praise, right? Tindal and Nelson was a great duo at cornerback. Nelson was a 4th-round pick. Derrick Tindal, Tindal Island on Twitter, had a really, really strong Badger career. But I'm looking at this cornerback group, and obviously new guys have to gel. We'll see how that happens. But they brought in 3 dudes with a ton of experience, and they're going to pair them with Alexander Smith, and a combination of Max Laffey, Samar Meldon, Ricardo Hallman, and Al Ashford. And to me, that's a super intriguing and super interesting group, right? So let's start with Alexander Smith. He's a senior, 5'11". That's the other thing you're going to see with this cornerback group. Not a lot of midgets in the top 4, in the top 5. There's a lot of players here that have the physical size and the athletic tools to match up with some of the receivers that really have given Wisconsin trouble. Alexander Smith is a senior, 5'11", athletic, and by all practice reports, account reports, he's really sees that cornerback 1 spot. He's been really good. He knows the defense. He might be cornerback 1. And then in the other side, you have these 3 cornerbacks. You have Cedric Dort, Jay Shaw, and Justin Clark, who are probably fighting for that second cornerback spot. Jay Shaw, those are all transfers who came in this offseason. Jay Shaw was a second-team All-Pac-12. Started 12 games at UCLA last year and 7 games in 2020. So you're going to hit on one of the themes of this Badger defense and this secondary group. It's experience. This secondary and cornerback group in particular is so experienced, and that matters. Because what does experience do? Experience allows you to play faster. It allows you to make reads quicker, to see defenses or to see offenses and what they're trying to do, right? So it gives you the ability to play a little bit above your athletic rating. When you're playing Ohio State and every dude on their team is a thoroughbred, every receiver they have is a thoroughbred, the more experienced players, they can mitigate some of those athletic disadvantages because they can play faster. And that's what this cornerback group can do. You're looking at Cedric Dort, who started 12 games last year in Kentucky, SEC player coming in. Jay Shaw, we talked about, has started 20 career games at UCLA. Then you're looking at Justin Clark, who's played in 47 games. He started 18 at Toledo. So you're bringing in 3 high-level starters. You're pairing him with Alexander Smith. All of these guys are 5'11", 6 foot, 5'10". They're all bigger corners. They're not midgets. They can all run, and they're all very experienced veteran players. So you're going to have 4 very veteran, experienced players with accolades and starting experience, playing experience in the 2 deep at Wisconsin at corner. That's never happened. Right now, how Jim Leonard, how Hank Poteet, the cornerback or the defense coordinator and the cornerbacks coach are going to deploy those, I don't know. I'm guessing Cedric Dort might be the slot corner. I think Jay Shaw and Alexander Smith are probably your top 2 corners. Where does that leave Justin Clark? I don't know. Maybe he's a safety. So there's a lot of depth, a lot of options, but you can never have too many good experienced players, and that's what you now have at Wisconsin. You have 4 cornerbacks, again, with good size, starting experience, and veteran. veteran starting experienced cornerbacks. It's just such a position of strength at this point. Then you have to give the coaching staff a ton of credit for having transformed this position from taking it from something that for a long time, a lot of people were concerned about how this secondary would look this year. Now you've added in these 3 players, and Alexander Smith has taken a step up. I think it's rock solid. I think Badger fans should not be concerned at all about this group. And behind him, Ricardo Hallman is a guy the coaching staff really liked and got into. He played as a true freshman. Max Laffey, Al Ashford, right? If you're looking further down the depth chart beyond what these top 4 are, Al Ashford was, in my opinion, 6 foot. In my opinion, the type of cornerback Wisconsin should take one of almost every cycle. Just an athletic dynamo, 6 foot, overlooked a little bit, but big, fast, athletic, runs a 4.4, 4.5. So he might be the next one up. And then, that gives you already 5 or 6 deep where you feel kind of interesting and confident on with Hallman and Ashford and those top 4 we talked about. So, just to recap, I've talked about the defensive line, talking about the corners. If you brought in 3 players who are all seniors, who have all started, who are all veterans, who are all 5'11" or bigger, and you're going to pair them with Alex Smith, who's drawn rave reviews at practice, that's going to give you 4 corners to deploy against the Ohio States, against the Penn States, against the Minnesotas, against the Nebraskas, against the teams that try to spread it around and have occasionally hurt Wisconsin doing that. You're going to have the cornerbacks now to at least in theory match up with it. So there is some risk in bringing in a bunch of new players. How are they going to gel? Are they going to pick up the system? I'm pretty confident that Wisconsin, Jim Leonhard is going to make it work. The track record's there. The benefit of the doubt is there. So, this is not a position I would be worried about at all. I think it's going to be a strength along with defensive line. Coming up next, everybody, we're going to talk about one more spot. And again, it's about a spot that gets a little misaligned at Wisconsin, gets a little bit of flack. But I think it's an interesting spot with a lot of young talent and some real stars that are ready to emerge. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, today's show is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline remains your number one source for all your sports betting needs and information. It has all of your latest sports news as well. This is the number one spot for Locked On. This is what we use for our betting information. Great spot for futures. And now's a great time. We talked about Wisconsin, the over-under 8.5. But if you're into NFL, baseball, basketball, this is a great spot for all of those futures, right? Football's, 30, 40, 50 days out. If you have a great feel on an NFL team, this is a wonderful time to get in BetOnline, find a future. The basketball, the free agency, trade markets going on. Baseball pennant races are going on. So go to BetOnline, find the futures that work for you. Also, as Vegas games, live games, roulette, blackjack. Use your mobile device today. Learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thank you again, everybody, for making Locked On Badgers your first listen every single day. Apologize we didn't get a show out on Friday. We had some technical difficulties. We had 2 different guests lined up, and both of them washed out for various reasons. So really appreciate everyone sticking with us. We're going to continue to build the community, continue to make this just one of the best sources of Badger Discord and talk and news that you can find on the net. So we're going to get into the last segment here. Another positional group where I think Badger fans are a little more worried than they should be, where I think maybe the general media is a little more worried than they should be. Let's talk receiver. And let's talk a position that over the last couple of years, I think the Wisconsin coaching staff and the recruiting development staff has really knocked it out of the park. So Chimere Dike, to me, I think he has a possibility. I think he's a possible NFL guy. I think he's explosive. He's got enough size. He's got enough speed. 14.4 yards per catch so far in his career. He just needs the ball. And he's really kind of been buried a little bit behind the Danny Davises and the Kendrick Pryors. And frankly, even Jack Dunn a little bit. All players, I think DK is better than those guys. He's faster. I think he creates separation easier, good hands, tough to bring down after the catch. There's your number one receiver. And I think he's a borderline NFL guy. Whereas I don't think Davis or Pryor were that. I think Cephas is really the last guy to go back to and say he is that type of impact, that type of big play, game-breaking ability. And I think DK has that. I think he's shown it from day one. He just hasn't been able to really crack the rotation for a lot of reasons. So I think he's going to break out this year. I think Badger fans are pretty high on him in general. I want to talk about that next group, right? You have Skylar Bell, Marcus Allen, Chiantas Lewis. So that next group to me, I'm going to throw Dean Ingram in there as well, but I'm going to keep him on the side because I think Dean Ingram, who's moving over from corner, is more of a specialty player, more of a slot player. I think that other group is all the top 4, right? So Chiantas Lewis and Marcus Allen to me. Lewis coming over from UCLA. Marcus Allen was a true freshman last year. He was the former Michigan commit. To me, really give Wisconsin a different type of body at receiver. Like Marcus Allen is 6'1", 210. I mean, he looks like Anquan Bolden a little bit out there. And in the moments he was on the field last year, in the very limited moments he was on the field, I thought he flashed. I thought he looked different. I thought the film showed that. I can't wait to see the next couple years of Marcus Allen's career at Wisconsin. I think he's a difference maker. And then Chiantas Lewis is another big body guy who was an 87, 88 type recruit, so an upper 3-star recruit, came over from UCLA. The coaching staff obviously targeted him. I think this is another really interesting player who can slot in with Marcus Allen, provide a physicality and a size at that position that I think is a little unique at Wisconsin. And then Skylar Bell, to me, looks a little bit like Chimere Dike as well, more of a big play threat. He's explosive. You know, we saw him starting to flash towards the end of last year. I think that top 4 is really good, and it's solid. It's young. I'm really excited for it. Now, the rest of the passing game has to come along, right? That's the other part of this. You can have great receivers, and if the quarterback isn't working, if the play calling isn't working, if the pass protection isn't working, none of it really matters. I think everybody gets that. But I think at least from a receiving standpoint, from that area, Wisconsin's kind of covered. I think they have the receivers to make this work now. Now everything else needs to come into play. Will that happen? I don't know. Like, I've talked about Mertz several times. I'm still a little concerned there. I don't know, but I think the receivers are there. I'm finally really confident to say if the quarterback play gets better, the pass pro, the play calling, I think the receivers are there to make this a really dangerous offense. And even the guys below him, we talked about Dean Ingram. I think that for several years, Wisconsin has been looking for a slot receiver, right? They wanted Stephen Bracey to be that. They wanted Jack Dunn to be that. They wanted Aaron Cruikshank to be that. And for various reasons, none of them have been able to do it. Health, holding onto the football, explosiveness. I think Dean Ingram, they're moving him over to be that guy. And I don't think they would be moving him over if he couldn't be that guy. So I'm excited there. That gives you a 5 deep. And then if you just look down the road, I talked about how much I like Tommy McIntosh, Vinny Anthony, Chris Brooks from that 2022 class. So I think receivers getting quietly kind of stacked. And when I was talking about the Wisconsin-OSU rivalry, I talked about the differences between receivers and cornerbacks. And I made a comment that I feel like Wisconsin is starting to close the gap a little bit at receiver. Now, close the gap doesn't mean you have 5-star receivers everywhere. It just means Wisconsin is moving their upside up a little bit at that spot. And I think that's very true. I think the DK, Marcus Allen, Chiantas Lewis, Skylar Bell group with that 2022 recruiting class falling behind them, I think it's a really good group for Wisconsin. I don't think Badger fans should be concerned at all, about that receiving group, about that receiving room. I think Alvis Whitted has done an incredible job, the receivers coach at Wisconsin. So I'm excited to see them in play this year. I'm hopeful that the quarterback play, the play calling with Ingram coming on board can really help match up that talent and make the receiver shine, because I think there's a lot of potential there. And really, that's the show today, everybody. I wanted to go over the 3 spots where Wisconsin, I think fans, and maybe it's the media in general, is overlooking spots. I think it's the defensive line, which is veteran, tough, big, and you're not going to ever have a defensive line in Wisconsin with a bunch of seniors and juniors and an NFL guy that's going to be bad. It's going to be really good. I think the cornerbacks with the 3 transfers are going to be really, really solid, really solid. They're all experienced. They're all 5'11" or bigger. There's athleticism there. And then I think this receiver group is very quietly one of the more upside-y, one of the more high ceiling receiver groups Wisconsin's had in a long time. And I'm very excited to see how that plays out. Really appreciate everybody tuning in, everybody listening. If you like the show, please leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe. And we're going to keep getting more content out. A bunch of guests coming up next week. So you're going to be excited for that. And when you're done here, listen to Locked On Big Ten with host Nate Dickinson and local experts across the Big Ten that take you all across the conference that we love. Until we talk next time, everybody, on Wisconsin.